Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 30 team selection and of course the wildcard is active, so I'll take you through my latest wildcard draft, some of the other players that I'm looking at and some general thoughts and notes on a Game Week 30 wildcard. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Right, firstly guys, you'll have to forgive me if there's a little bit more background noise than usual. I normally record these videos in the evenings, but I'm recording this one in the morning and it's just incredibly loud where I live. So there is cars driving by, trucks beeping outside. So if there's anything bad, I'll just re-record that section. But if there's a little bit, I'm just going to have to rock with it. So apologies if you've got your headphones all the way up and you hear a little bit of noise in the background. But I just wanted to give some general thoughts on a wildcard 30 and just some things that I've been thinking about whilst I've been building my wildcard draft. So the first is about leaving the third spot open. And what I mean about this is obviously you can only have 3 players from one single team. And whilst it might feel right now like you know the exact triple up you want, you just don't know what might happen come especially Game Week 37 when you're looking to bench boost, but even just in the near future too. I'll give a few examples. So Gusto Petrovic and Palmer on a lot of people's wildcards. I've had many wildcards with them. I won't spoil that as to whether they are currently the 3 that I've got. But what happens if Jackson just continues to look really good? Maybe he picks up his 10th yellow very, very soon, and then he comes back and he's scoring goals. And by the time that their double-double comes around, we want Jackson. Then I'm going to have to sell one of Palmer, which I'm not going to do, or then Gusto or Petrovic. I'm using extra transfers to remove an asset to bring in another one from the same team. The same thing goes for Spurs. In a couple of my drafts, I've had Udogie, Porro, and Son. And then what happens if Richarlison just starts as the number 9? Let's say takes a penalty ahead of Son. All of a sudden, I've then got to either sell Son, which I still probably don't want to do, or again, sell one of the defenders. And then you can say the same, obviously, for Manchester United. If you have Dalot and Onana on your wildcard, maybe you have left the third spot open, but then you've got Rashford, you've got Garnacho, you've got Højlund. What happens if Man United start scoring more goals, which doesn't look overly likely at the moment, but I just feel like there is some value, not for every single team, but leaving the third spot open. I did actually build a draft where I had 2 Newcastle, 2 Man United, 2 Spurs, 2 Chelsea, and I left the third spot open for each team, but I think that's maybe overkill. I think there are certain teams when you can feel pretty comfortable that the 3 that you choose are pretty decent, but I also don't think you feel like you have to triple up on all of these teams. So do think about potentially leaving that third spot open for some teams. Then there's some things I wanted to say about Chelsea and Spurs. They are very valuable. There has been a lot said about the fact that their double in 35 or 36 won't be perfect. And also, these are 2 teams that at points this season have struggled both defensively and offensively. Offensively for Chelsea, defensively for Spurs. So these aren't necessarily the 2 best teams in the league. And I understand it might feel a bit crazy having 6 players from these teams. But I do think that if you are on the same strategy as me, which is wildcarding now, free hit in 34 and bench boost in 37, even if you don't have the bench boost, they just feel like such great assets because they've got really good short-term fixtures. They then have a double in one of 35 or 36 and a double in 37. And then with Spurs, their final 2 games of the season are going to be Burnley and Sheffield United. So Spurs and Chelsea just serve you so well that I would have at least 4 assets from these teams. But a lot of my wildcard drafts, including my latest, doesn't have 6. So don't feel like you have to have 6. But I would say that 4 for me, if you're on a similar strategy to me where you are free hitting in 34, makes a lot of sense. If you're not free hitting in 34, then that becomes a lot more difficult to decide. The next thing, and this is probably the most important thing that I would urge you to think about if you're building a wildcard draft this week, is the short-term gain as well as the long-term gain. I am someone that is very patient, hence I've kept most of my chips, and I like looking, we call it delayed gratification in psychology, but you think about the future and you're not just immediately trying to reap the rewards. I do understand that, and there is value to it. But there are many, many weeks before Game Week 37 bench boost. And that bench boost, even with a perfect 15, it could fail. And what you don't want to do is sacrifice the next 6 or 7 weeks just because there's a bench boost coming in 37. So I would urge you to try and think about that. Have at least 9 or 10 players that are doubling in 37. Think about the long-term fixtures too. But remember that there are points up for grabs right now. I was building a wildcard draft maybe earlier on in the week, and it was a really nice draft. It set up a perfect bench boost in 37. But I looked at my team in Game Week 31, and it was a disaster. And I'm like, I'm literally wildcarding in 30. How can I wildcard in 30 and have a shocking team the next week? It just doesn't make much sense. So I've now made a few changes to my team, and all of a sudden it's looking a lot stronger for Game Week 31. And so there is this balance to be had. But you can go the other way with this, right? Where you have like triple Arsenal, even though they're not very good long term. You load up on Wolves assets because they've got Burnley in 31, and then you're like, oh, now I can't build a very good bench boost in 37. So like I said, there is a balancing act here, but I think most people are maybe thinking a little bit too long-term and overemphasizing the importance of Game Week 37 when they could get a lot of points and a lot of green arrows in the meantime. And there's kind of a similar point linked here is you need to find a balance with planned transfers. I've gone too far each way. So the first couple of drafts that I built, I looked ahead and the team was already perfect for Game Week 37 and Game Week 38. Obviously, injuries do crop up, but I didn't have not a single transfer that I needed to make at any point. And I'm like, I've got 6 free transfers. If you free hit in 34, you'll have 6 free transfers between now and Game Week 37. So you don't need to have the perfect team for 37 and 38 now. You can book in a few transfers. And what we mean by that is if you choose someone like Bukayo Saka and Gabriel, you don't want them on your 37 bench boost. You've essentially booked in 2 transfers there. That's fine. I think you can go as far as 3 or maybe even 4 or sometimes 5. But what you don't want to do is book in all 6 or have yourself in a position where you've got 7 or 8 transfers that you need to make before that bench boost, because then obviously you're confirming you have to take at least 1 or 2 hits. So I think the sweet spot is something around 4 booked in transfers. That leaves you 2 spare transfers if Darwin gets suspended, if Isak that you've chosen picks up an injury, if just there's random rotation, maybe James comes back and you've got Gusto in your team, or Burns starts at centre-back and Lascelles isn't as nailed as we thought. All of these things could happen with some of the players that we have, and I think it's important to have a few transfers spare for that. But do remember that if you have to take a hit, you have to take a hit. People have to take hits at all point in the season, and I don't think you should build a wildcard draft thinking it's impossible that I'll ever take a hit for the remainder of the season. So you need to find a balance with short-term and long-term gain, but also find a balance with how many transfers you're planning. And then the other thing to note is money will become available. I've had picks such as Gusto, Kelleher, Bradley, and I'm like, I'm kind of in a bit of trouble here because I've got no money in the bank and I've got a very cheap asset. What happens if I need to sell Kelleher and I don't have the money available? But when I'm looking ahead, Saka becomes not an easy sell as such between sort of 33 and 35, but he is someone that you could sell potentially. And I would expect that most people that wildcard in 35 probably won't have Saka because he doesn't double in 37. And the fixtures aren't perfect. He plays Spurs, he plays Man United. These are fixtures that Arsenal are going to want to win and need to win. So it could be that he's still a great option, but I think you could potentially sell him in those weeks, and therefore money will become available. If you do Saka to Foden, Saka to Gordon, Saka to Garnacho, so much money becomes available that these spots don't really matter as much. So I wouldn't stress about the structure in your sort of defense and maybe your 8th attacker being slightly weaker, because you probably can upgrade them later on when you sell the likes of Bukayo Saka. Maybe even a Salah could be sold at some point, given he doesn't double in 37. So those are just some general thoughts on Wildcard 30 and things that I've been thinking about throughout the week. And my thinking has updated throughout the week, and I'm starting to change my opinion on certain things. So before we take a look at my team, let's take a look at my watch list or short list of players that I've potentially looked at considering, and then look at the 15 that I think I'll be going with into Game Week 30. So guys, before we take a look at the 15 players that I currently have in my wildcard draft, I thought it would be useful to take a look at my shortlist of players that I am currently considering and have been in some of my drafts. I have only included players here that have actually been present in my draft at some point. Therefore, there are good players that you could definitely consider that they just haven't made their way into my draft. This is, of course, a Game Week 30 wildcard shortlist, but specifically for free hit 34, bench boost 37. If I wasn't free hitting in 34, I would be much, much more keen on Arsenal assets. I would definitely have triple Liverpool, although I still think that is very, very viable. I might have a Crystal Palace asset in there, a Wolves asset. I would probably almost definitely be on Solanke rather than the likes of Darwin and Isak. So there are some changes that I would make if I was not free hitting in 34, but this shortlist and strategy is around the idea that I can free hit in that game week. So I'm not necessarily going to go through every player in detail because that's what I'm going to do when I talk about the players that I've picked. But I just wanted to show this to you to show the sort of players that you could be looking at. So budget keepers, I think Kelleher's fine, by the way. I really like Kelleher as a punt because he is so cheap. And we still don't have a definitive update on Alisson. And even if Kelleher only gets you to game week 33, you free hit in 34, and then you have to sell him in 35. Like I said, you're going to have free transfers to use. And when I've planned ahead, it's not like there are tons of attacking transfers you're going to want to make because a lot of the attackers that you pick now will be fine for you in the future too. So I quite like the idea of going for a short-term punt on a keeper, and Kelleher could be that. Mid-price-wise, Petrovic, Onana, Pickford, Raya would be the sort of 4 that I would be considering. And then at the premium price, Ederson is fine, but it's just not for me. And I like Vicario as well. I would want a Chelsea or Spurs goalkeeper, I think. Vicario or Petrovic would be in there for me to cover the double-double. And also their fixtures are very, very good outside of that. They both make over 3 saves per 90 on average. I think Petrovic is probably the slightly cheaper one and therefore maybe the slightly easier one to pick. But there are some doubts around whether he'll play every single game. If he drops a couple of stinkers, Sanchez could come in. So I would have at least one keeper that doubles in 37. And outside of that, you could pair them up with whoever you want. So some sort of combination between those goalkeepers. Defense, I think it's going to be a lot of budget defenders for a lot of people. So I would imagine that most of you, if you're on a wildcard this week, have at least 2 of these budget defender options of Lascelles, Bradley, Gusto, and Aït-Nouri. The bottom 3 there, Bradley, Gusto, and Aït-Nouri, very, very attacking. Lascelles, obviously, a very cheap option, so you could go there. Mid-priced, I think Dalot and Udogie are really nice around that £5 million price point, considering they double in 37. But don't overlook Gabriel. Arsenal are fantastic defensively, so you could always go there. And then at that premium price, the only 2 that I'd really be considering at the moment are Porro and Trippier. But my advice here would be only put these players in if you're not sacrificing your attack. I don't think Porro or Trippier, for me, have the upside that is worth dropping one of your key attackers for them. But if you get your attack in and the rest of your defenders and your goalkeepers and you've got a free spot, you could, of course, go for that. In the midfield, again, I think you're probably going to need 2 of the budget options. Maybe you can get away with 1 of Garnacho, Palmer, Gordon. Most drafts I've seen have 2 of these, unless you go a little bit cheaper in the forward line. Mid-priced, really good options, but again, I've not seen a ton of these in drafts, which is Richarlison, Maddison, and Foden. All of them double in 37, really nice high upside options. And then of the premium options, most people have all 3, which is Saka, Son, Salah. I would say that if you're on my free hit 34 strategy, there's definitely a conversation to be had about dropping Saka, but you're not going to drop Son or Salah. So I think Son and Salah are pretty much locked in most people's drafts. Finally, for the forward line, only one budget forward I'd consider on my strategy, which is Muniz. Mateta is fantastic, and so is Cunha if you're looking for a cheaper option and you're not free hitting in 34. But if you are, I think Muniz could serve you really well. The next 3 fixtures are actually very good for Fulham, and it allows you to squeeze a more expensive midfielder in, and maybe even a premium defender too. So Muniz definitely needs to be considered. Most of the strikers in that sort of mid-price, which is Solanke, Højlund, Jackson, Darwin, Isak, all of these players really, really good options in the short term and the long term. I would like to own more of them. I actually would love to have probably 5 or 6 forwards at the moment. I'm struggling with that forward line, as we'll discuss when we move on to my team. All of these have either the really good short-term fixtures or they serve you well long-term, and it's finding that balance. But they all have pretty good underlying data, and they'd all be seriously good options. So realistically, you can only select probably a maximum of 2 of them, and then pretty much everyone will have Haaland. There are some people asking about going without Haaland. You'll see in a second, I do have Haaland, and I just think for me, it just doesn't make much sense at this point in the season to go without him, because I think you can build a perfectly good team while still having him, and therefore, if I don't think you're sacrificing too much, it probably makes sense to go for him. So there we go. That is my Game Week 30 wildcard shortlist. Just to give you an idea, I will have, unless something drastically changes, I'll have 15 players from this list here as my wildcard. I don't know exactly which 15 it will be, but I haven't considered many, if any, players outside of this list. So let's now move on to what my actual Game Week 30 wildcard looks like. So I will just say apologies. I probably shouldn't apologise, but this team is very, very similar to the wildcard draft that I showed you earlier in the week. But my thinking around a lot of the players has updated. So I want you to stick around because it's not just going to be me saying the same things. There are some certain things that I'm thinking about more so with certain players now, which makes them less or more likely to be in my wildcard team. So do stick around because it should still be a very different video. This draft currently has 1.2 million in the bank. I've not deliberately left that. That isn't left for anything in particular. But as you will see a bit later, I can use that for a very, very, very good transfer in 32 or 33, which at the moment I am planning to make, which is to upgrade one of my defenders. So that 1.2 million will be very useful, and therefore I am hesitant to use it. But if I do feel like it can gain me something in the short term, I'm also not against using that 1.2. So I'm not keeping it specifically for a transfer, but it does offer a really nice route for me. And as things stand, with no transfers being made, but like I said, I'll get 6 free transfers between now and my bench boost. I have 11 doublers in 34, obviously because I'm free hitting. I have 5 doublers in 36, which tells you that I have currently 5 players from Chelsea and Spurs, and then I have 9 doublers in 37. That number is a little bit lower than it was previously. I think it was like 10 or 11 previously, which means that if I want to get 15 doublers in 37, I have to make 6 transfers. That means that I've technically booked in all my transfers, but all I will say on that is 2 of them I'm pretty happy having a single game week, which is Salah, as I'll discuss a bit later, and even Aït-Nouri on my bench. I think he's got Crystal Palace at home in 37. If I have to bench boost him, that's absolutely fine. So actually, I wouldn't be surprised if I only get to 13 doublers, because I don't think double game weeks are a trap, but I've seen some people go, how are you going for Aït-Nouri? Go for Van Heck instead. Do you think Van Heck with his double and limited attacking threat, is that likely to outscore Eight Nuri, who's got great attacking threat and a home fixture, against a relatively weak attack? I'm not so sure. So I don't think that just having doublers is enough. I think sometimes single game players could outscore them. Salah does have Villa away, but you telling me you're that sure that Salah won't outscore some of the doublers? So I don't think you need 15 doublers, but of course that will always be the aim if possible with your free transfers. So hopefully that makes sense with the general setup. I'll start with the goalkeeper situation because honestly, this is the goalkeeper and defense situation I'll probably spend the most time talking about because this is the part that I've struggled with the most. In every single one of my drafts, I have had Petrovic because I think he's very cheap. And in comparison to like a Jackson, who I do think is fantastic, Petrovic gives you that third Chelsea for such a cheap price. He makes over 3.5 saves per 90. And whilst Chelsea aren't the best defence, the fixtures are definitely there to attack for them. So I don't mind the defensive double up of Petrovic and Gusto. And I don't have to play Petrovic every single week or Gusto because I've got a decent goalkeeper and I've got other decent defenders on the bench. So I only double up on Petrovic and Gusto when they've got the really good fixtures, such as Burnley at home this week. So I really don't mind having the double up. My concern is if Jackson starts to really pop off and I really want him, I'm going to have to sell one of Gusto or Petrovic. So that's immediately an issue. And Nkunku will be back at some point if he can stay fit. He might provide a potential issue in that I might want to get him in. Let's say Sterling just goes on a nice run. Like, I am locking myself in with triple Chelsea. As I spoke about in the first section, that's not ideal. But I'm also looking at this and thinking, Jackson would have to go pretty crazy for me to want to squeeze him in ahead of some of the other forwards I've got. And I do think that Reece James will be back at some point. So maybe selling Gusto at some point for another double game weeker and then allowing that third Chelsea spot to be free isn't the worst idea. So I'm kind of okay for now blocking that third Chelsea spot. But I certainly think there is value in going without a third Chelsea asset to, like I said, leave it open ahead of their double-double. So let's say I'm going for Petrovic. In most of my other teams, I've tried to put Onana in there. And the reason I like Onana is he doubles in 37. So if you have Petrovic and Onana, you cover the double game week 37. Your bench boost is perfectly set. You don't need to make a defender transfer. The reason that I'm less keen on it, though, is game week 31. And I know it's only one game week. I'm fully aware of that. Petrovic plays against Onana. It could be 0-0, and I could be sat there thinking, why didn't I just go for Petrovic and Onana? Or one of them could keep a clean sheet, and I could guess that correctly. But it doesn't feel great going into a game week immediately after the wildcard with such a weak defensive option. And 1 week, you can't have the perfect team every week, of course, but I'm looking at this and thinking, if I have Petrovic and Onana, and I have also some other outfield players, I was looking at it, and like I said, I didn't have any transfers that I needed to make, and whilst I don't normally advocate making a goalkeeper transfer, if I can put another goalkeeper in there, who can serve me well in the short term, not only for 31, but for some other game weeks as well, but also has a really good fixture in 31. And then if I have to transfer them out, so be it. I don't see many other places, of course, injury permitting, that I'm going to have to make loads of transfers. So I kind of have come around to the idea of selecting a goalkeeper that has a better fixture in 31. So ideally, if it's not Onana, I would have liked Pickford, because Pickford has Sheffield United at home in 37. So I would have liked to have Pickford. So really, ideally, my double up with Petrovic would have been Onana or Pickford, but Pickford plays against Newcastle away in 31. So if I am going with this idea of wanting to make sure my team is good in the short term as well as in the long term, Pickford and Onana don't really do that for me. Which then has left me with two real options, which is Kelleher, so cheap, Sheffield United at home in game week 31, and he could keep his place for a while now. We don't know when Alisson will be back. Hopefully Klopp gives us a more definitive update, and maybe that will change my opinion on it, but Kelleher has been in a lot of my drafts. The reason Kelleher isn't currently in my drafts, as we'll discuss in a second, I really like Bradley. And I think Bradley's upside in the very short term could be good. And I want to have some other outfield players from Liverpool. The attackers, Darwin, Salah, Luis Diaz is even a very decent option too. So I don't want to have Bradley and Kelleher. And if I think Bradley's got that upside, Kelleher unfortunately can't be in my team. Which is why you can see that the goalkeeper change that I've made is now David Raya is in. I think there is definitely value to going with only one Arsenal attacker, or Arsenal player, considering that I'm free hitting in 34, remember? And beyond that, I don't think that Arsenal's fixtures are perfect. And I don't even love their fixtures in 32 and 33. They play against Man City this week. Really, it is just that Luton at home fixture. But it feels like such a banker for a clean sheet. And if it isn't, so be it. I'm still happy I made this move. But I kind of want a little bit of defensive cover for that game there. Luton at home feels brilliant. And then if you have that with Bradley as well, Sheffield United at home, those look like two very good chances for clean sheets. So again, this is me attacking the short term a little bit more here and having David Raya in. And to be honest, let's say that Petrovic and Gusto look absolutely shocking. Let's say Chelsea concede 3 goals against Burnley. And then in game week 31, Manchester United put 2 or 3 past them. It may well be that I just decide to start David Raya in 32 and 33 against Villa and Brighton. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. I'm not saying that's a great idea, but if Chelsea do look that bad and Arsenal continue to keep clean sheets, well, then I've got the option to just play him there. So I quite like the idea of making sure that I've got some Arsenal defensive cover. The other option that I've got is going for Kelleher and Gabriel rather than Raya and Bradley. The reason that I'm currently leaning Raya and Bradley is I think it's a slightly lower owned combination. Actually, I know for a fact it is. Gabriel is so highly owned and Kelleher is more highly owned than Bradley. So I think Bradley and Raya is a really nice lowly owned combo that if it does pop off, I'm laughing. Like, let's say Raya makes a few saves, Gabriel gets booked or something like that, and Raya gets 9 and Gabriel gets 5. That's a big game for me. And I think Bradley's attacking threat is there. So I kind of like this combination. And like I said, the idea would be that I get Luton at home and Sheffield United at home with the two of them. So hopefully that makes sense with that goalkeeper combination. And I know a lot of people just say, just pick Onana. Just sacrifice 31, but it saves you a transfer. And that could be the best idea. I'm fully aware that could be the best idea, but I kind of like the idea of making sure my team is good in the short term too. I've kind of just spoken about Bradley in so much detail there anyway in the goalkeeper section, but I like him for the short-term punt. I am very aware that Trent is aiming to be back for the Man United game. So I am very aware that I probably only get Brighton, and I might not even get the Sheffield United game. He could be rotated. It could be Gomez at right back. But I think if Trent is aiming to be back for the Man United game, why not play Bradley in Brighton and Sheffield United? Like, what's the value in resting him if he's not going to play in 32 anyway? So I think Bradley will get the Brighton and Sheffield United games. They're both at home. Sheffield United at home is the best fixture in the league, arguably, along with probably Luton at home. So I see that as a really nice game for him. And if by some miracle Trent's not back by 33, it's then Crystal Palace at home. But I am looking at probably selling Bradley in 32. Because remember, if I wildcard this week, I don't make a transfer in 31, I'm going to have 2 transfers to make in 32. So the idea would be that Bradley would be one of those transfers in 32. And I'm looking at Diogo Dalot is currently the planned transfer because I don't have a Manchester United defender in my team. I don't need them for the next couple of weeks, but if I have a transfer to make in 32, it's looking at being Bradley to Dalot. Some people might just say, go for Dalot this week. You've got the funds to do it. Just sell Bradley. Don't go for the short term. But again, it just makes my team look weaker for next week. It's arguably even slightly weaker for this week if I do it as well. So I just like the idea of a bit of a short-term punt, and I don't mind the fact that I don't have Manchester United defensive cover, considering they are 16th in the league this season for expected goal conceded. So that's the current plan there around Bradley. The other 2 players in my starting 11, Udogie. You'll see that I've got 1.2 million in the bank. I could just keep Pedro Porro. I haven't actually sold him in my team because I've got money tied up. So the saving that I would have by going for Udogie instead of Porro is 0.6. So I've got 1.2 in the bank right now. So I could still have 0.6 million in the bank by going for Porro instead of Udogie. But that then blocks me from the Bradley to Dalot move, which I don't necessarily hate too much. But also, when you look at the attacking data across the season, Porro is ever so slightly better than Udogie. But in recent weeks, Udogie has been matching him. And I think with Maddison back, Porro's not getting so many chances to create from open play. He's had a few set pieces taken off him too. I still think Porro is marginally a better asset than Udogie, but is he £0.6 million better? I'm not so sure about that. So in most of my drafts, I've had Udogie. If I've only had one of them, I've had Udogie. I've looked at having both. There is a combination that I can have where I have Porro and Udogie, and I don't mind that, but then it blocks that third spot. And again, it could be that Richarlison becomes a real option for me in the future, and I want to move to him. So I'm kind of keen to leave that third Spurs option open. So at the moment, Udogie's in there. And then Gusto has been in every single one of my drafts. There seems to be a lot of concern with him at the moment around Reece James. Reece James posted on Instagram a very cryptic picture that suggests that he could be back. Even if Reece James is back in training, how long until he's ready to start? And then even if he is ready to start, who's to say that Gusto is going to just be immediately dropped for Reece James? I mean, he has been exceptionally good. Who's to say that Gusto won't play at left back? Because their left backs are pretty stinky. We saw how bad Chilwell was over the international break as well. Maybe getting some slightly unnecessary criticism, but Gusto could play at left back, or it could be Reece James at left back, or Reece James could play at centre back. We've seen that before. Slightly more unlikely, of course, but I don't think it's just a given that Gusto drops out immediately. But if that is the case, I wouldn't imagine that's for the foreseeable future. I, at the very least, get Burnley at home this week and probably Sheffield United away in game week 32. There are some short-term gains again with Gusto. So I know some people will be worried about Reece James. I'm just not bothered. If he loses his place, so be it. I think there is enough upside right now that I definitely want Gusto. So I'd be very surprised if I go without Gusto. And he has been pictured in training, by the way. So he pulled out of the international break with illness. I think he'll be absolutely fine. Looks like he should be fit and available for Game Week 30. So that's the starting back line this week. Petrovic, Gusto, Udogi, Bradley. On the bench, you can see I've got Lascelles. Don't really need to talk about this in too much detail. Botman's out for 6 to 9 months. Lascelles looks like he should be pretty nailed on. He was last time Botman was injured. There is some concern that Byrne could play centre-back and Livramento at left-back, but I don't think that's likely. Lascelles was really, really good when he played, and he's very, very reliable. He's been their club captain at points, so I think Lascelles is probably a player that Eddie Howe's fairly happy relying on. No, he doesn't have much attacking threat. No, Newcastle are not a good defence, but at 3.9 million on a wildcard, considering he could be doubling in 37, it feels pretty easy for me. So Lascelles has been in pretty much all of my teams. I could even argue to start him this week instead of Bradley, but I think the attacking threat of Bradley maybe outweighs the slightly better clean sheet chance for Lascelles. And then the fifth and final defender, I am adamant to get him into my team. I really want to because I've just got a good feeling about him, which is 8 Nuri. Again, booking in another transfer. I could even go for Dallo instead of 8 Nuri. I do not need 8 Nuri in my team, but what I like about him is 2 things. Attacking threat is through the roof. He's getting like 7 or 8 shots per game on average. One of the best in the league for defenders. Eye test-wise, brilliant. Wolves are actually pretty good defensively, actually away from Molineux, which is where they are playing in Game Week 31 against Burnley. So they're not very good defensively at home, but away from home, they are much, much better. So I actually like that 31 fixture against Burnley. And the fixtures right up until I free hit in 34 are actually very good for 8 Nuri. So not only does he have the attacking threat, he has the fixtures. And then in Game Week 35, he's got Luton at home. That is another brilliant fixture. And then in 37, he's got Palace at home. So I actually can see a world in which I just keep 8 Nuri for the rest of the season. But if I do need to take him out at any point, he's not highly owned enough for me to feel like I'm going to get massively punished if I need to sell him for another doubler or if I want to make a transfer there. So I feel like there's little risk attached with 8 Nuri. He gives me a really nice fixture in 31 against Burnley, along with Bradley's fixture against Sheffield United and Rye's fixture against Luton. That team is looking really, really good. And then beyond that, I like the fixtures as well. So I actually think I'll play 8 Nuri in like 4 of the next like 5 or 6 game weeks. So he's looking a really, really good option for me. And I just like the fact that he won't be that highly owned, I don't think. But even by people on wildcard or people not on wildcard, I don't think that many people have 8 Nuri at the moment. Because I think most people focus their transfers on Arsenal and Liverpool. So that completes the defence and goalkeeper situation. That is 15 minutes almost there. But those are the sort of players that I'm thinking the most about. I guess players that are missing here is Gabriel is a big one. But of course, I've got Raya, so I at least cover the Arsenal defence. And I think that is fine as that combination. Pedro Porro is another player that is missing here that I think I would like to squeeze in. Potentially could be instead of Udogi, could be alongside him, but then I'm sacrificing elsewhere. Kieran Trippier, great option, but he's just so very expensive too. There was also some of the other defenders that I mentioned, obviously in the shortlist section, but I'm pretty settled on this defence. I don't think the defence will change unless I get a little bit of FOMO around some other players, but that's the defence. Let's move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield, and I will keep this section a bit shorter, I actually do promise on this occasion, because it's the same midfielders I showed you earlier on in the week, which is Palmer, Son, Saka, Salah, and Garnacho. I really like this midfield. I think the 4 that are in the starting 11 will definitely be on my wildcard unless any of them get injured or injury doubt. So Palmer, Son, Salah are the 3 best captains this week, all at home, and they all just serve me well for different reasons. Salah in the short term is unbelievable, and I don't mind bench boosting him in 37. I may well captain him this week, and I'll discuss captaincy in a second, or I may well... And I will definitely, captain him in 31. Beyond that, I just think he's exceptional. So I'm going to want to have Mohamed Salah in my team, regardless of the fact that I'm free hitting in 34. And then Son and Palmer are just the 2 best assets from Spurs and Chelsea. Great immediate term fixtures. And then the double-double in probably 36 and 37. So Palmer, Son, Salah, I don't need to talk about in much detail, other than captaincy, which I'll discuss in a second. Saka, like I said, there is justification to drop Saka. You do not need Saka in your team if you're free hitting in 34, because the best part that you want him for are those 2 fixtures in 34. But when I look at the fixtures, City this week, I think Arsenal will score, and Saka is often involved in that. But you don't have to play him this week. I may well play Garnacho instead, and I'd love your opinion on that in a second. But then it's Luton at home in 31. I want Saka for Luton at home. Goal difference might be important in the Premier League if it goes down, obviously if they're on the same amount of points, Liverpool, City or Arsenal. Arsenal's goal difference is pretty good already, but it could certainly be improved. So I think in the games where they are easy to win games, and Luton at home, you would argue is maybe the only one there that is an easy to win game for the remainder of the season. They are going to have to score a lot of goals to make sure that their goal difference is decent. So I think they will go for that. Then it's Brighton and Villa. I'm not saying they're bad defences. Actually, they are 2 decent defences, but they are games still where you expect Arsenal to score. 35 against Spurs isn't ideal. That's probably when I would look to sell Saka potentially. But then he's got Bournemouth in 36 if I decide not to. So I just think over that spell, I'm expecting Saka to still get attacking returns. And I just don't see many other attackers that I am that confident outscore Saka over this period. So I'm still happy having Saka in my team. It's nothing to do with ownership, I promise, or safety. It's just I think Saka is that good. But I don't think you need to start him this week, right? I've got Garnacho in my team. And I would love to know down below, please help me on this one. Should I start Garnacho instead of Saka? Because if I'm predicting the way these games will go, I think Arsenal, if I say Arsenal City, I would say 2-1 City. If I had to predict how that game would go. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit to Arsenal, but I would say that City would just about edge it at the Etihad. Maybe 2-2 or maybe 2-1 Arsenal, but I would be shocked if Arsenal score more than 2 goals. With Man United versus Brentford, Brentford is so bad defensively at the moment, I would predict this game to be 2-1 or 3-1 to Manchester United. Maybe 2-2 or something like that instead, but I'm probably predicting that Man United and Arsenal score a similar amount of goals. And they probably are involved in a similar quantity of their team's goals in terms of a percentage, Saka and Garnacho. So I could just take the risk that Garnacho is just more heavily involved in the Man United goals. And I think the ceiling for Garnacho is a lot higher. I don't see Arsenal scoring 4+ goals against City. And whilst Man United haven't shown much sign of that in any games, maybe outside of obviously the game against Liverpool, I still think that Garnacho could potentially get more returns than Saka. Maybe I'm just trying to bend the narrative here to want to start Garnacho, but if there is a possibility for me to bench a highly owned Saka and start a slightly differential in Garnacho, I will do it. So I'm sort of 50-50 on that decision at the moment, and I would love your help with that down below in the comments. Just very briefly on the players that I've not included here that we obviously discussed in the midfielder section, I would say that the midfielder that I'm most keen to get in that I don't have is Foden. If I want Foden, though, I don't think it would be instead of Saka. I think it would be instead of Garnacho, which means I have to drop one of my forwards. I don't mind that. We've obviously spoken about how good Menez is, and I'll discuss him in the forward section, but I think I prefer Garnacho and a better forward than I do kind of a Menez and a Foden, but I do think it's very, very close. So Foden is the one I'm most keen to squeeze in. I also really like Richarlison, especially if we think he'll start this week, and Maddison. I mean, I've sold Maddison from my actual team. Maddison could do really well over this spell too. Gordon is another great player. My issue with Gordon actually is Garnacho has bad fixtures in the week when I want to bench him, and he has good fixtures in the weeks when I want to start him. Gordon just has good fixtures. So Gordon just creates a benching headache for me every week, which isn't a bad thing, but it might mean that I end up benching other good assets just to try and squeeze Gordon in. So I think Garnacho just suits my team moving forward a little bit better. So I think the 2 players that are most likely to make their way into my midfield this week is Gordon or Foden that aren't in there now. But to be honest, I haven't changed that midfield 5 all week. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move on to the 3 forwards. I just realised I didn't discuss captaincy. Let me wrap up the rest of the team and I'll discuss captaincy in its entirety. I hope I do. I'll probably forget again, to be honest. But the front 3, again, is the same as the one I showed you earlier in the week. But I have been going back and forth on these spots quite a lot. The only 2 that are nailed on for me are Haaland and Isak. And Isak's only nailed on if we don't get a negative update about his fitness, or let's say we just get randomly a positive update about Callum Wilson's fitness, maybe it puts me off. But assuming that Isak has got through that international break fine, he played 2 lots of 90 minutes for Sweden. He's looking very, very fit. And he actually said that he was surprised that he played that many minutes, but he's feeling good. So by all accounts, it looks like Isak is not at full fitness. I don't know if he ever will be. He's very, very injury prone. And that is obviously the risk that you're taking. But he certainly looks fitter than he has been in the past, and I think he's in a good spot right now, especially with Wilson out, where he should start the majority of games for Newcastle. So that is a risk that I am happy to take, and if he gets injured, I just transfer him out. Like I said, I do have some transfers to play around with, not too many, but if I need to transfer Isak out, so be it, and there are some really nice options that I could move to. So I'm happy starting with Isak, and I actually really like the fixture this week at home against West Ham. Haaland is going to be in there. I think you could start with Watkins, you could start with Solanke and then move to Haaland later, but I just want him in place. I think the fact that it's at home against Arsenal, I think Haaland will get her an attacking return. That's my prediction. An assist or a goal. I don't think he'll get 2 attacking returns, but I think 1 is there. And if you consider that he'll get 1 and it saves me a transfer in the future, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So Haaland will be staying for me. So Haaland and Isak have been locked in for me. And you might be surprised to hear that Darwin is the one that's not. My issue with Darwin is he's got 3 games in a week now. Brighton, Sheffield United, Manchester United. It's not only 3 games in a week, but because if the Sheffield United game was on Wednesday, I would feel slightly more confident that he plays it. The issue is that the Sheffield United game is on the Thursday. So he's playing Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. And it's Thursday night again. So he's not going to get time to recover until the Friday. So he's got Friday, Saturday essentially to recover. Normally Friday would just be a recovery day where there's not much training. So really it's like 1 full day of recovery on the Saturday and 2 days if you include Friday. Then he's got to play again on the Sunday. How many minutes is he going to get against Sheffield United? I think he'll start and get close to 90 against Brighton because he's had a break. Obviously, there is then a decent break between Brighton and Sheffield United, so I don't think he'll be rested against Brighton, but this is arguably the most difficult fixture of the three. Sheffield United and Man United are weaker defences than Brighton. So if I think he's going to start this week, fine. Does he start against Sheffield United? I don't know. And if he does, how many minutes does he then get against Manchester United? But then he does have Crystal Palace at home the week after that. So I do think across the next 4 weeks, Darwin starts 3 of them. I'm pretty sure about that. But if he only starts 3 and he misses the one that's the best fixture, could you go against him? And obviously there are rumours that it wasn't actually an injury, it's just an international break thing. I do think Darwin is struggling slightly with this hamstring injury. So my prediction is that Darwin doesn't start against Sheffield United. And I think if that's my prediction, why am I picking him? Because what I'm picking him for is Brighton and Man United with a 30 minutes against Sheffield United or 20 minutes. And he could do damage off the bench. He absolutely could. But when I look at someone like SALAH that sat there with 3 really good fixtures, you know he's going to play 90 minutes in every game on penalties. Should I just go for SALAH? It's just not a very me thing to do, is it? I love Darwin. I love the upside. And the attacking data is just so good. And then if I want to be more me, and when I say more me, I like taking risks and I like picking high upside players with good underlying data. If I want to be more me, Nicholas Jackson's data is outrageous. He's got Burnley at home this week. And if he gets suspended, so be it. If he gets booked this week, I just transfer him to Darwin if I think Darwin starts against Sheffield United. So that could even be a decent transfer. Start with Jackson this week against Burnley. If he gets booked, transfer him to Darwin. Or if I think Darwin's very likely starting against Sheffield United, I could still transfer him to Darwin. Or if Darwin doesn't look like he's going to start and Jackson doesn't get booked, keep Jackson for Manchester United. He'll probably score in that game as well. So I kind of am liking the idea of starting with Jackson, but then I have to remove one of Petrovic or Gusto. And obviously, maybe it's not the best idea going into a wildcard with a player that you know is very likely to get a 2-game suspension soon. So that's why I've sort of settled back on Haaland, Isak and Darwin. Muniz is the only other player that I've not really mentioned here. My issue with Muniz is the only reason I would want Muniz instead of Isak or Darwin is because I would want to squeeze in Foden. And whilst I do like that, I still think Garnacho is really good in the weeks that I want him. And I don't really like the structure as much of having one cheap forward and one more expensive midfielder. I like having 2 mid-priced strikers along with Haaland so that I can easily switch them around. If I want to bring in Højlund, I can do that. If I want to switch to a Jackson, I can. If you have Muniz in there, it's a minimum 2 transfers to get the money back into that forward spot. So at the moment, I just prefer the structure of Haaland, Isak, Darwin. I suppose Højlund's the other one that I haven't really mentioned. I just think Højlund's better from 35 onwards. The fixtures immediately for Manchester United aren't that strong. It's why I've gone off Dalot and Onana. And I think that you can get away with doing one of Isak or Darwin to Højlund a little bit later. Probably Darwin to Højlund in either 33 or 35 is the current plan. So there we go. That is the team. I think I've discussed everything I want to discuss there. You've obviously seen my shortlist. This team is rated at 97% according to Fantasy Football Hub, 63.4 predicted points. I'm very, very happy with it. What I'm going to do in the final section, and if you want to switch off now, I'm fully aware I've been talking for far too long, but in the final section, I'm just going to show you my team week by week, because I think this is incredibly useful to know what sort of transfers I'm planning and when, and what I think my team will look like come Game Week 37 when I play my bench boost. Guys, I actually forgot to discuss captaincy again, but I'm remembering now. So on captaincy, if you want to see my detailed opinion on captaincy, or at least see the data behind each of the options and the defenses that they're playing in my Game Week preview video. It's one of the lowest viewed in a while, by the way. So go head over there and watch it and drop it a like. I would appreciate that. But I did a 15-minute section on captaincy and talked about this in a lot of detail. So if you want more than just a few minutes of my opinion, go and watch that video. But for me, it will be Son or Salah. I don't see the value in Haaland this week, and I don't want to take a punt on anyone else. So Son or Salah will be my captain. As you can see at the moment, it is on Salah. They've each got things that are great, and they've each got things that aren't great. So for Salah, he's the best asset with the best underlying data and the highest ceiling if you ignore the fixture in any given week for me. Salah is just absolutely unbelievable, but he has the most difficult fixture. I know Brighton haven't kept many clean sheets this season. It's like 2 or 3, I think, but they are very good defensively for underlying data. They don't concede as many chances as some of the other teams. If you remember early on in the season, I think Salah got 2 attacking returns against Brighton, but they both came right at the end of the game due to, was it a penalty and a defensive mistake? But largely, they actually nullified his threat. But I do think this is the sort of game that usually suits Salah, so I'm a little bit confused on that one. On Sonny, Son is just brilliant as an asset, right? Excellent finishing, excellent player, and the fixture is the best this week. So if you are going based on fixture and still picking an excellent asset, Son is the best captain. And so I'm thinking, like, am I just overthinking this one? Should I just captain Son against the worst defence in the league? Especially when it's Luton at home, right? Luton are worse defensively away from home. So this just feels like a perfect fixture for Son. My concern with this is a couple of things. One, there's this sort of maybe a myth that goes around that Son's not great against low block teams, but I think largely that is true. I think he would suit this Brighton game very well because Brighton will push up the pitch and leave space in behind. And that's where Son is very, very good. So I don't necessarily think it's the perfect matchup for him. My other concern with Son is that if Richarlison does start, Son's pushed out to the left for at least 60 to 70 minutes of the game. Son is great on the left, by the way. It doesn't make him a bad option at all. It doesn't make me think that he's an awful captaincy option, but he's not quite as elite as an FPL option, at least this season, when he plays on the left in comparison to through the middle. So I think I slightly prefer Sonny if Richarlison doesn't start, and that may well impact my thinking around captaincy on him too. And then with Palmer is comfortably the least popular captain. So I've run some polls over on Twitter. 50% are on Salah, about 30% on Son, 40% on Son, and then about 10 to 15% on Palmer. Most people just don't see him as the best captaincy option this week, but I think he's great. Burnley are not a good defence this season, especially away from home. Burnley struggle a little bit more. Palmer, I think, has the most double-digit returns this season. I might have made that up, but he's definitely had the most combinations of a goal and an assist in a single game. I saw that stat pop up. So he can get multiple returns in a given game. This feels like a really good fixture for Cole Palmer. And also, Burnley concede most of their chances on the flank where Palmer operates. So for me, I would argue that Palmer is right up there. Not slightly worse, but right up there alongside Son and Salah. I promise you, I mean this, I've had my captaincy on all three this week. Throughout the week, I've been sort of moving it around. I've got no idea where I'll end. This is the hardest captaincy decision of the season for me. So I promise you, if I don't have any inkling of which way I'm going to go, at the moment, if the deadline was now, I'd go for Salah and I would just back the Egyptian king that he is that good as an asset. But the more time that goes on, I'm thinking more and more that I am not giving Brighton enough credit and that I should probably attack the fixtures of Luton and Burnley. I'd love to know down below in the comments, who are you captaining for Game Week 30? So guys, I want to try not to make this section too long, and I say this all the time and it ends up being so, but I don't need to show you every single transfer possibility for every week, but I just want to show you how the team develops to just give you an idea about what it might look like for the bench boost in 37. I'm using Fantasy Football Hub here. If you do want to check them out, there is a link down below in the description for 30% off. So this is the way the team looks in 30 on the wildcard. 1.2 million in the bank, which is lovely jubbly. So the bench is as per here. As you can see by Fantasy Football Hub, Son and Salah both predicted to get 7.4 points in game week 30 with Palmer on 5.5. So they definitely think it's between Salah and Son. So there you go. They don't have a preference either between the two of them. For 31, I wouldn't need to make a transfer because my team's looking very good. Even if there is an injury, I probably still wouldn't. Remember, it's a midweek deadline. So the only difference is really to my team is Aït-Nouri comes in for Burnley, Bradley comes in for Sheffield United, and Raya comes in for Luton. So I then have Raya, Bradley, and Aït-Nouri against Sheffield United, Luton, and Burnley. It's brilliant. This is why I'm really liking this team, because it's also strong for Game Week 31 too. I then have the option to play Lascelles or Udogie in this week, so it doesn't have to be Udogie against West Ham away. The attack is looking very, very nice, and I will be captaining Salah probably, I think. Maybe Saka, maybe even Haaland. We'll discuss captaincy for 31 next week. So that's the team for 31. Not planning on using a transfer. In 32, I'll have 2 transfers. So if I don't want to burn a transfer, I have to make one. You can see, by the way, this defensive combination that I've got, I love. Petrovic and Gusto against Sheffield United, Udogie against Forest at home, Aït-Nouri against West Ham at home. This defence just looks good every single week, so I'm a big fan of it. I could even play Raya if I want to, by the way, if I don't want to double up on Chelsea, but I think I would. And I've got Lascelles on the bench as well against Fulham. So looking really good. In fact, the attack is also looking good, right? So I don't have to make a transfer. But as you can see, I've got Dalot in that spot now, because the idea would be that unless Trent is injured long-term and he doesn't come back, Bradley to Dalot doesn't give me anything this week. I would just bench Dalot, but it uses one of my transfers and it gives me another player there for good fixtures from 35 onwards. So the idea in 32, assuming that price changes don't screw me out of it, it says I've got 0 in the bank. I should have 0.1 in the bank. I don't know why it says 0, but I should have 0.1 in the bank. So I have a little bit of wiggle room to do Bradley to Dalot. If Dalot goes up in price, I'm going to have no wiggle room, which you might well do. So that's the current plan at the moment in 32. If I have to go for a Martinez or a Maguire or a Lindelof or something like that, whoever's playing at the time, then maybe that's what I do. Or maybe I switch it up and just go for a Newcastle defender instead. Something like a Dan Burn or a Fabian Schär. I can't afford Fabian Schär, so it'll have to be a Dan Burn if he's still starting at that point. But I've got lots of different options there. That's the plan at the moment. Going into 33, remember, I'm free hitting in 34. So I've got another transfer. Sorry, I've got 2 transfers here. If I don't use both of them, I burn them. Right, because I've been rolling, then I only used the 1 in 32. I've got 2 free transfers in 33. I have to use them both if I don't want to burn them. But I don't plan on using them both at the moment. I don't think. So at the moment, I've just done Raya to Pickford, which is 1. So just Raya to Pickford. The other transfer that I could make here, which I'll have to think about, is I could do Saka to Foden as well. I've actually planned that move for 35 instead, but maybe it makes more sense in 33 because Saka's got Aston Villa at home. Foden's got Luton at home. Maybe this is the week to do it when upon reflection, when I think about it. But the reason that Pickford's coming in is he's got that fixture in 30. You can't see it there. In 37 against Sheffield United at home. He'll be my bench boost goalkeeper, I think. I could go for Onana if I wanted to as a potential option. But then that does block me from getting Højlund in, and I think I want Højlund. So if I go Dalot, I can't go Onana. If I go someone else, I could go Onana instead. But these are the moving parts that I'm thinking about. Defense is still looking really strong if I want to... I'm sorry, the defense is still looking really strong. Petrovic, Gusto, Dalot, and Aït-Nouri, so no issues there. The attack's looking strong, so it's just if I want to make that Foden move in midfield, I would free hit in 34, so we can ignore 34. And that means going into 35, I would just have the 1 free transfer. And as you can see, there is when I've chosen to do Saka to Foden, but I may well decide to do that previously anyway. And I don't love selling Saka, but I think Foden's a really nice option to end the season. And look at that defence still. Pickford, Brentford at home, really nice because Petrovic has Aston Villa away. Dalot against Burnley at home. Aït-Nouri against Luton at home. Lascelles against Sheffield United at home. Defenders aren't getting as many points this season, but this defensive rotation that I've created, I really, really do like it. So that's the situation there. My 1 free transfer to be to bring in Foden. In 36, this is the week where we're predicting that Chelsea and Spurs will double. So I've got Petrovic, Udogi, Gusto, Palmer, and Son. If I want to add a 6th, it would actually have to be for Salah. So Salah has Tottenham at home. Maybe at this point I could do Richarlison or Maddison in for Salah, or I can make a defender transfer. But at the moment I'm thinking I might just leave that and not do it. If I don't, I could then either roll the transfer, or as you can see here, I could bring in Højlund for Darwin. Højlund's ready for that double. Also, Darwin's got Tottenham at home. Højlund's got Crystal Palace away. Maybe a slightly stronger fixture for Højlund. So I have that option therefore there. So if I want to, by the way, I would have Udogi in the starting 11. Of course I would, because of the double. So the team's looking pretty good. I know the fixtures wouldn't be great for Spurs and Chelsea, but it's a double game week, so it's not the end of the world. So that's the situation in 36. And therefore, going into 37, I would have 1 more free transfer, which is, I've done here, Aït-Nouri to Ake, but I could keep Aït-Nouri for Crystal Palace at home. Like I said, I do not have an issue with bench boosting him. That would mean, whilst it's not represented here on Hub because the fixtures haven't been confirmed for 37, I would have 13 doublers with the only single game week players being Salah and Pickford. So you could argue that Salah would be on my bench boost, which is absolutely fine. So my bench boost would be looking something like, I reckon that is probably a more realistic bench boost for me, which is Pickford against Sheffield United at home, Salah with just 1 fixture against Aston Villa away, Lascelles with a double game week, and Dalot with a double game week too. And then 11 double game weekers in the starting 11. Listen, it's not going to go like this. There will be injuries, there'll be other issues. Isak might get injured again. It might be that Gusto loses his place, right? I've just assumed that Gusto's kept his place the entire time. This will definitely not be exactly how it goes, but I want to show you that with relative ease, I can get to a decent position for 37. Then in 38, is the reason I don't like free hit in 38, by the way. The team's looking really, really strong, right? Mostly home fixtures for a lot of my players. That triple up for Man City against West Ham at home. If the league isn't wrapped up, I love that there. I've got Udogi and Son against Sheffield United away. Triple Chelsea against Bournemouth at home. Really nice home fixture. I've got Salah against Wolves at home again. If the league's not wrapped up, I may even want to add another Liverpool player in there. Saka and Højlund have decent fixtures too. The team looks pretty good for 38, and I'd have again 1 free transfer to use. So there we go. Hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully the transfer plans make sense. I think the reason I like doing this was mainly for the defense, because I've struggled with the defense a little bit, and the combination of players to pick and making sure I'm looking short-term and long-term too, and also with the goalkeepers. And I just think this combination of players that I've got right now just suits me really, really well. They've got high upside, a lot of them attacking, cheap, and the fixture rotation's really nice. Let me know what you think of my wildcard team down below in the comments. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 30 wildcard team selection video. Hopefully you did enjoy it. And if you've watched to this point and you've not yet liked and you've not yet subscribed, please do consider doing both those things. Until next time, which will be the deadline decisions video tomorrow, which is actually going to be my birthday. So it'll be a birthday video tomorrow. Deadline decisions. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.